born from chaos. The world doesn't always adhere to logic. Sometimes down is up. And sometimes when you're lost, you're found.
The Klingon Empire has been in disarray for generations.
We've encountered them.
We have been waiting for someone worthy of our attention.
Captain, incoming!
Change is the essential process of all existence, Commander Burnham.
Go!
You must challenge your preconceptions, or they most certainly will challenge you.
What the hell is going on this ship? Run!
We are creating a new way to fly. Better hurry. We're getting very close to...
You're mad.
I'm mud. You chose to do the right thing. Even a great cost to yourself. You helped start a war. Don't you want to help me end it?
Very cinematic. That was a great trailer. Hello, 24-hour landing party people, and welcome to the Boston Sci-Fi's Classic Cinema video cast. I'm your host, Michelle Barbera, and tonight I'm delighted to introduce our two very knowledgeable and fun guests. On the lower right, we have Erin Underwood, who plans and programs events for MIT for the MIT Technology Review. Also, very cool behind the scenes. I definitely want to hear about. She plans and programs sci-fi conventions. She's also a writer, and she actually just won a screenwriting contest just recently. So congratulations, Erin. And then we also have Michael Ahr, who is a writer at the wonderful Den of Geek website, and he is on the science fiction television beat, so he should be the world's authority on sci-fi television. So we're so delighted to have you today.
Well, thanks so much, Michelle.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight is pretty exciting because you guys are just the right people to talk about our theme, which is technology in science fiction. And we just are opened with that very cinematic, beautiful trailer for the latest Star Trek incarnation, which is Star Trek Discovery. So I thought that might be a nice jumping off point for talking about sort of the roots of technology in sci-fi and how it's been developing over the years. So either of you would like to start chatting about that?
I'm wondering actually, because I love Star Trek Discovery and a lot of the new iterations, but would Gene Roddenberry be rolling over in his grave to see such strife? Because, you know, Star Trek began as such an optimistic, forward-thinking, like everything's going to be fine and the galaxy will unite and everything will be great and the Prime Directive will make everything okay. And now we've got, you know, this new iteration that really just is filled with conflict.
Yeah.
And we love it, of course, but you talked about the roots of sci-fi and how not only because Star Trek innovated a lot of the technology that we take for granted in our science fiction now, but also that hopeful attitude, which in later years in the 21st century especially has become much darker and apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like I always liked Star Trek because it was so optimistic versus Star Wars because it was a space western, which kind of looks like what Star Trek Discovery is kind of turned into. But Erin, please give us your thoughts.
I think that while Star Trek might have turned from being that futuristic, optimistic, utopiastic type of show, I think where it's really turned is maybe hope punk in a way. Like, it's a very hopeful show. There are a lot of dark elements. There are a lot of problems. There is a lot of strife. There is some drama in that show. But the one thing that you can always kind of count on, especially with characters as strong as Michael Burnham, is that they don't give up. They don't ever give up. And that, to me, is emblematic of our current period in time. We cannot afford to give up. And so we don't. And we invent our way out of a lot of our problems. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about Star Trek is they really do. They come up with the science that they need to solve their problems. And maybe not always in the way that we would imagine or think that it should happen. But I do love that hopeful, futuristic look, even though it's not an optimistic future.
Mm.
And I think we also have, with the technology being rooted in science fiction, of course, Star Trek didn't come up with all of the different innovations, but we give them a lot of credit for the transporter. We give them a lot of credit for the phasers and hyperspace and a lot of the things that we now take for granted in our space science fiction.
But
but at the same time, it's not all wonderful. You know, like some people might have problems with the, being able to create whatever you want, Earl Grey tea hot and just have it appear, or the holodeck as well, which came in later iterations of Star Trek. But again, like if we didn't have Star Trek, half of these shows wouldn't be able to talk about tachyon fields and things like that, because that's where we saw it first.
Yeah, that's a plethora of made-up language. I mean, you guys must know. I bet you guys can rattle off all the flux capacitor mumbo jumbo. What are some of your favorites for fake technology?
Well,
I just mentioned mine, tachyon fields.
Well, what I think is fantastic is like like you just mentioned the Earl Grey. Like he just opens a panel and suddenly there's magical Earl Grey there. We're getting to the point where that might actually be possible with 3D printing. I mean, who knows? There might be a point where you could 3D print the cup. You could 3D print the water that's, got a chemical composition similar to Earl Grey tea with whatever additives you like. I mean, there is a point where some of the technology, to some extent, really did influence the people who were imagining this, like the people from Google X Moonshot Factory. I mean, they watch this stuff. They love this stuff. They think about, the transporters and the communicators and, the different parts of the ship or what the people do on the ship. And they think, you know what? That's not only probable, I think I can make that possible. And let me look at how I can do that. And then they come up with some early form of it. And so I think we are seeing Star Trek not only inform our science fiction, but also informing our science to a degree.
Yeah.
Flip phones. I don't think the flip phones would look the way they did had not Kirk been calling from the away team.
Yeah.
So we did have a comment, by the way, that came from a person who's watching right now, just in case, who says, what did Star Trek invent that we take for granted now? Not teleportation, not tractor beams, not FTL. Yeah, you're right. And I acknowledge that. These are things that were popularized by Star Trek, not invented by Star Trek.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that there will be a point, with Star Trek The Next Generation coming up with like the holodeck. We all kind of imagine immersive technology at some point in our future. I mean, it's in a lot of our older science fiction texts as well. But you can imagine now, and knowing where we're going, that there may be a point where a holodeck or something similar is very, very possible.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, it's interesting now because we have come so far technologically that we've lost some of our naivete
Yeah.
about technology. So Star Trek was the original Star Trek, and even the one from the 90s was very aspirational. And now we're actually starting to think about what it will actually be like when we can mine asteroids and what kind of problems will come up. And
Mhm.
it feels a lot more like people trying to imagine what the geopolitics are going to be like in the future, rather than just, this is a great thing we could do someday. It's starting to happen.
Yep. You can apply that also to medicine. I mean, you have like Bones with his little scanner thing that I forget what it was called in the original Star Trek. Tricorder, right?
Yeah.
Where he's got the tricorder and he's like, this woman has, kidney disease.
Mm-hmm.
To a degree, we are developing those kind of tools right now where you could, on the spot in a remote location with your handheld telephone, do some amount of diagnosis to that extent that is very similar to a tricorder, and come up with a diagnosis and a cure, hopefully, at some point for the patient.
It's amazing. I think one thing that I hope happens is they were able to have this sort of germ barrier that they created. They never really explain it, but there's some kind of germ barrier. So you never have to worry about getting contaminated in the operating room, and everything's done sort of externally with I don't even know what. Audio, I don't know, but that would be great. Non-intrusive surgery, which is also something that's coming up more and more. Yeah, Star Trek is an amazing thing. It's an amazing aspirational show, which I adore.
Yeah, very aspirational.
And there's other ones that tried that too, like the Orville, for example, tried to sort of imitate that feel, while going in a different direction with the comedy, of course. And to different extent, people respond to that differently. And for whatever reason, because Star Trek Discovery and the Orville came out with season 1 the same year. Of course, they've sort of diverged now because the Orville's gone through quite a few delays. But season 1, they both came out at the same time, and everyone compared the two of them. Everyone was like, "Look, the Orville's doing what Star Trek used to do, very hopeful, very optimistic, and the Star Trek Discovery is so dark and gritty." It's like, well, yeah, it's like you're speaking to a different audience in the 60s versus now. But in some cases, you're not. Some people want that nostalgia. Some people want that familiarity. And you didn't always get that, especially since Star Trek Discovery did a lot of things like, changed the look of the Klingons, which was quite controversial. So even outside of all the technology, the storytelling is something that has evolved, in different directions or gone back to what we knew and felt comfortable with.
That's funny because I haven't seen Star Trek Discovery. I'm embarrassed to admit. And you're saying they changed the Klingons a third time because they used to kind of look like people with big eyebrows, and they look like Worf with the bridges. And now, what do they look like now?
They look much more insectoid in Star Trek Discovery.
Huh.
Yeah. The great thing about Star Trek Discovery is it really is kind of this midpoint between the past and the future of science fiction, which I really love. It really does kind of connect the different points of science fiction together, because they definitely borrow from their heritage, from those first episodes, from Kirk and Spock and those old storylines and how they thought about exploration. And with the new, I don't know if we're allowed to do spoilers on the podcast, but with the new season of Discovery, where you're really looking at the evolution of humanity or time, over long periods, and how that changes and that changes people. And I think that's a really interesting take and a really interesting perspective. I do wonder, Michael, what Gene would say. Like, would he say, "Wow, this is great," or "Whoa, this is interesting"?
Yeah.
I have the feeling he would not like it, but that's no reason not to do it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's interesting also because shows take different tacts. So some shows are very particular. They go into specifics. They really try to figure out, like with The Expanse, they really try to figure out like how would they be in the spaceship with zero gravity, and they like solve that problem without the fake gravity. But then other things just go in for the fake gravity, no explanation, and it just sort of like a different way to go. And I guess maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Michael and Erin, is sort of like the audiences sort of like will accept either way, depending, I guess, on what the show, on how good the show is.
One of the things technology in general, but yeah, space sci-fi in specific, but even with time travel, which is one of my favorite subgenres of science fiction, you have to establish rules. And once you've established your rules, as far-fetched as they might be, you got to stick to them.
Yeah. Right.
So
yeah,
you
let's
have
actually,
the internal logic of the show has to be consistent. That's all.
Yeah, let's look at our next clip from Doctor Who, which actually addresses the whole time travel thing, and in the way that anybody would, the first thing you would do when you go back in time is, and you can roll the clip.
Kill Hitler. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Spoiler.
What's wrong with the shock absorbers? Problem in the knees,
Wait,
so we don't have to run.
Oh, there we go. There it is.
Do not call for help. This room has been sound screened. You have been found guilty. Justice mode activating.
Hang on! This is 1938. We're too early. We need to go later in his time stream.
Something else. We've got incoming.
On screen. What the hell is that?
Everybody out! Don't bring the smoke, don't get out! Where are we?
A room! What room? I don't know what room. I haven't memorised every room in the universe yet. I had yesterday off. Mel's, don't go in there! Bad smoke, don't breathe the bad smoke, bad, deadly smoke, because somebody shot my TARDIS!
Doctor, this guy, I think he's hurt.
Transmit normal life signs. Artificial gravity holding, but we should get upright when we can.
No, hang on. No, it's fine.
Oh, hello. Sorry, is this your office? Had a sort of collision with my vehicle. Faults on both sides. Let's say no more about it.
What's up? Help me, Doctor.
Thank you, whoever you are. I think you have just saved my life.
Believe me, it was an accident.
That's really funny. One of the great absurd moments in that TV show.
Well, it's great too. Like I just finished talking about how you have to establish your rules and then stick to your internal logic. And the Doctor Who logic is that there is no logic. Mm-hmm. It's like they're allowed to do it. They are allowed to get away with it because they've established that they have a wide berth in terms of changing history in Doctor Who. So that is their rule set.
Right, and they've always had a little bit of a purposely, I mean, at first probably not purposely, but now probably purposely chinky sort of technology, so that you're like, don't take this too seriously, please.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for the suspension of disbelief. You know, I think it was Samuel Taylor, no, it was William Wordsworth, I think, that first talked about the suspension of disbelief and how when you're in a story, you need to earn that from your reader, or in this case, your viewer. And I think that when it comes to technology specifically, like Michael said, you set your rules, you set your patterns, you say this is what it is. And if you deviate from that, suddenly you're jumping the shark and people are all upset. Mm-hmm. Nobody's upset that Doctor Who just like crashed into Hitler's office and saved his life and did that, because that is part of the Whoverse. That is part of the accepted norm. Mm-hmm. And so now we're all wondering, oh my God, what do we do? how do we stop Hitler without changing time, or should we change time? And what's great about that particular scene is it makes you start wondering about the what ifs. And that is pure gold when you're talking about science fiction. What if we did kill Hitler? What if we didn't kill Hitler? How would he take that technology? And what would he do with it? It's such a rich moment. That is such a rich moment in storytelling that I love that clip.
And they actually do have some examples of playing fast and loose with the rules in Doctor Who that do get them in trouble. And I'm thinking specifically of the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
Which in some cases, season to season, has become a bit of a deus ex machina and, was used a little bit too freely, such that it was always getting them out of jams that they shouldn't necessarily have been able to get out of so easily. So you can take something like that, even when you have specific rules or lack of rules in the case of Doctor Who, and still get yourself in trouble. But there's other shows. I know one of my favorite time travel series is 12 Monkeys, which had a Hitler killing episode. I mean, they didn't kill Hitler, but they did go. Oh no, I guess they blew up the building. He might have died in there. Who knows? But they played it comedically in that show. But at the same time, that's a show that has some hard sci-fi rules with time travel and what you can and can't do, what you can and can't change, predestination, free will, all that stuff. And boy, if you get yourself locked into that mold, you better be careful because the fans will call you out on it.
It's true.
They remember it better than the writers. Sorry, they remember it better than the writers do sometimes, right?
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah.
It's really true. There's another time travel show, which I love, and I don't know how many people really watched it, but Travelers, it was on one of the streaming networks, I think. Was it Netflix?
Yeah.
And Travelers was also like, their rules were hard and fast. They had certain agents. They could go back to a certain point. They could go, only forward to a certain point. They could communicate with the future, but that was about it. Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. That show is good too because it doesn't use physical transportation. So all the different things that we talked about with tropes and transporters and warp speed and all the things that carry through from science fiction show to science fiction show were absent in Travelers because it was one of the first ones that decided let's just send the consciousness back in time, not the whole body, and that's now since been imitated.
And what
in fact,
a great
it was
way
before.
to save on budget.
That's actually been
right?
done in the past too.
Oh, it has. I said, what a great way to save on budget. It's just have them get a headache.
Exactly right, and they don't have to do any kind of fancy special effects because they're in the present. Time tunnel. Thank you, Justin, in the chat. There were other ones that did that same thing.
Also,
Quantum Leap.
Quantum
Leap, of course.
Oh yeah, Quantum Leap.
Quantum Leap was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, there were some really good time travel shows over the years. I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, there was another one about, I don't know, this guy that would go back in time and solve problems and he had a stopwatch. I can't remember the name of the show.
Time Bandits. No, that's a
well,
movie.
Time Bandits is an absolute
great.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there was a trend, I think, and Continuum from Canadian television probably started it. The recent trend where I hadn't seen much of time travel on television before that at all, and now you see it everywhere. Timeless, did it on NBC. There's just a wealth of examples that have happened, and of course, individual shows do it. Legends of Tomorrow, of course, did a lot of time travel, and then you get into the Disney shows and Loki doing parallel universes and things like that, and you've definitely got yourself a trend.
Yeah. And Legends is a funny one because that really is magic in a lot of ways. Like what they pull off, that's like so far from science. Like that is like science magic in a way. But you have superheroes and suddenly they are using science to up their skills, and to make themselves that much more powerful or formidable in the universe that they're in to solve the problems that they face.
Right. And that was kind of one of the themes of, I know this is a movie, but The Winter Soldiers, where the people who are enhanced or even like, so say Batman was a series, but it was always so strange to me that Batman really was just a vigilante with a ton of money and some gadgets. He was like, is he even really a superhero? At that point, it was all technology for him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I think that, technology in a way, as it develops, enhances human ability. And, we were talking previously about how characters, and specifically superheroes, are born out of the time that they're in, and they adapt to what the people of that time really need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that superheroes like Batman that are really focused on the technology and really, really fancy schmancy advanced technology,
Mm-hmm.
They are adapting to kind of what we need today and what we're looking for, and someone to look up to, or someone to aspire to, or along those lines.
Yeah, Iron Man being the same way too. A lot of the superheroes created their own super strength,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's because the society of our day, even though those superheroes were, created in an earlier age, they've been interpreted on the screen in a way that appeals to the needs of today, specifically with regard to technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There seems to need to be a scientific explanation, no matter how outlandish the character is, right? Even if it's like I think we were discussing earlier with the Norse gods, like Loki and Thor, they explain that it is technology to them. What always seemed like magic on Earth, like they seemed like deities. That's actually just their technology.
Yeah, the Rainbow Bridge or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just another Star Trek transporter. It might have a lot larger range though.
A lot larger range, cross-dimensional range.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really love about, I don't know, I guess the technology enhanced superheroes is that it goes back to that moment of hope that, we mentioned in the earlier part of the show, where in a way, as bad as things might get, you still think that maybe technology can help us out of it, whether it's our superheroes are adapting these crazy gadgets or suits or virus killers or whatever it might be. We still hope that that it is able to help us. And, I think that that's really, when you get to the core of science fiction and science fiction television or even film, the big what if question is super important. But for me, that message of hope is also a core pillar of science fiction. There's a lot of science fiction that's very not dull, but dark and down and dreary, and you want to go jump off a building after you've finished watching the movie, and you think to yourself, why did I just spend like an hour and a half or 2 hours watching that? For me, that doesn't bring out the best of what science fiction television has to offer. If it's not inspiring you to think about something better, to think about building a better tomorrow, building a better humanity in a way, I think that's what the core of sci-fi TV really, really does aim at. And that's one of the things that I really love about it.
Yeah. Another thing that it kind of leads us into, we were talking about what technology we see versus what technology can do. That's something that's been on people's minds for a really long time, is artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that, Erin. It's kind of interesting how it's evolved. And I think there's sort of like hope, but also a fear of it. And probably grossly overestimating how smart a machine can actually get. What are some programs that you enjoy that involved both of you that involve artificial intelligence?
So I'm happy to start out, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. So
Michael, take it away.
I need you to lead this one because I'm going to piggyback on what you said.
Okay. All right. So with artificial intelligence, the thing is, AGI does not exist right now. Artificial intelligence right now is really it's just learning. It's just these learning languages, learning over and over, and kind of teaching itself what answer to go for. When you're looking at science fiction, pretty much every AI that you're looking at is an AGI, Advanced General Intelligence. And whether it's HAL 9000, saying that, no, you cannot shut me down, and, we're going to talk about this right now. Or whether it's person of interest with the machine trying to protect its creator or her creator and her operator and humanity as a whole. I mean, those are forms of artificial intelligence that I think make people imagine that this is what artificial intelligence is and what it will become. That's not at all what it is. Possibly that's what it will become at some point in the distant future, but we are not there yet. I think the closest we're going to get is when you're putting some coordinates into your nav computer and you need to jet across, the solar system. Artificial intelligence may help you kind of map your course and figure out some of those things. But that's kind of we really, really misunderstand artificial intelligence at this point. And I think our fiction and our films kind of enhance our current misunderstanding of what artificial intelligence really, really is.
I think it's headed in the right direction, though, because we've come a long way from the HAL 9000 and even more recently with Skynet.
Yeah.
Again, from the movies, but it's still relevant. Because as we see it more and more in television, person of interest is a good example, because you have a man created something that their hubris has created this thing that is now going to bite them in the butt. But at the same time, there's this dichotomy between the machine and then these two battling artificial intelligence, one of which has humans' best interest at heart and one of which does not. And so there's that sort of midway point, and you start to see things like Star Trek: The Next Generation. Of course, Data became the android that wanted to be human, the Pinocchio figure, which was imitated later in other series. The one that springs to mind is Dark Matter, which had the android also kind of always being very curious about human behavior and things like that. So it's not that they were necessarily benevolent, it's just that they had their own personal growth that was parallel to their servitude, if you will, of humanity, because of course they were typically there to serve the ship that they were on or something like that. But at the same time, they had their own journey to go on separately from the people that they served. And then of course there's still a lot of things that include artificial intelligence gone haywire, such as the 100, which included an artificial intelligence that really destroyed Earth in the premise of that show. But there's still a little bit more of there's less Skynet where it's just inevitably going to go wrong, to a little bit more like, well, maybe we can work with this. Okay, we didn't do it right, but how can we tweak the programming to maybe end up with somebody who can join us as a separate species of artificial intelligence?
I think one last thing before we have to go, I think it would be really interesting to talk a little bit about how, say, prescient Star Trek: The Next Generation was with, say, the Borg, right? Because now we're all connected, right? And the Borg were all connected, or it was like they were like on social media all the time.
They were socially connected.
Very socially connected. But there's the Borg, and then there are shows like Upload. I don't know if you must know that one, Michael, where a guy's consciousness gets uploaded to this, basically like this after death resort where all these other people's consciousnesses are and he has to navigate this afterlife.
That's the science fiction good place, basically.
Yes, the science fiction good place. And there's so many shows about our connectivity, our autonomy, our privacy. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that sort of, we have a huge obviously interest right now in that, because things are they're sort of like getting more and more in our heads, right? They know, the internet knows, exactly what kind of ad you might be interested in from keywords. I mean, they just, even subtly. So I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about that for our ending.
Well, gosh, there's so much to say right there. There's so much to say. I think that when you're looking at some of those things and kind of looking at that interconnectivity, and I would even say like the micro stories, macro stories, overall story arcs, scene arcs, series arcs, whatever, those things all do kind of play together. And I think that science fiction, especially Star Trek, does that really well. I think The Expanse does that really well. A lot of these science fiction stories that kind of, it's like they were made for that kind of storytelling. And I just want to mention that in February 16 through 21 is the 47th annual Boston Science Film Festival and Marathon. And a lot of these shows, a lot of the things that we're talking about actually come up in those shows that they highlight there. And just maybe a personal request to make them think about showing some of the Expanse shows, perhaps at the festival, because one thing that the Expanse does is it feels very contemporary. Like it feels like a lot of the science could exist, but it's definitely placed far out into the future. And they don't mess around with like, oh yeah, it took like a week to go across the galaxy or across our solar system. No, it took like a month. It took 2 months or 3 months or whatever it might be. Like they really don't play too fast and loose with the science. I mean, they kind of cut the edges around a little bit, but they earn those moments of suspending our disbelief, and how well they pull off the rest of their science, and how they pull off their story arcs, how they pull off their character creation. And so I think I need to let Michael talk, because I've been talking.
Well, the Expanse is a perfect example of what we were talking about here, because you're merging the two ideas that we started with, the technology and all that, and how it's become more accessible, but also the social connectivity of people, because not only does the Expanse really nail the technology, especially with gravity, anything to do with gravity, they've nailed it. Super accurate in terms of the physics of it, but also the future of society, imagining certain societal constructs, connectivity between cultures that really have a lot in common, but don't see that. So the Earth and Martians and the Belters are all, humans, but there's a lot of fissures there. And how do we heal those wounds? And at the same time, maybe unite against a common enemy, or for a common goal. And just imagining, marriages that are made up of several different people, and that produce one offspring, and group marriages and things that, would seem a little bit far-fetched to us now, but, who knows how social mores will change over time. It's not just the technology, it's like the social aspect of it as well. And that's the storytelling in addition to the science fiction. I mean, it's really just a story that's framed by science and technology, but it's at its heart, it's still conflict and the characters that we love.
Yes, thanks. Erin was good enough to mention the 47th annual Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival, which will be coming up February 16th through 21st. So I just want to remind everybody to go bookmark that on your calendar and check out Boston Sci-Fi's webpage, their YouTube page, where you can watch all of the episodes of all the video casts we've ever done. And we go to like Twitter. I mean, follow us, sign up for the newsletter. It's really, really cool stuff, not just during the festival, but all year. I thought maybe we could end on some of your recommendations for which people should be watching now that's out, and maybe stuff that maybe they missed and that they can go back now, because now the beauty of streaming is you can go back and find stuff. Michael, why don't you go first?
I have so many recommendations. I know. I don't know if it was you, Erin, that was talking about not having seen Devs yet and needing to go back and see Devs. That should be top on your one of the top ones on your list. But one that's coming up that I'll recommend, it will be airing this Friday, is Foundation on Apple TV, which I was fortunate enough to see a couple episodes of, and it's a wonderful adaptation of a classic science fiction. So you want to talk about modern interpretations of classic science fiction. Foundation is doing that because, of course, Isaac Asimov wrote that in the 1940s as short stories and then collected them into a trilogy in the 50s.
Wow.
And
they'll have no shortage of material.
Yeah, so they have a lot of inspiration to work with.
All right. So Foundation, and you said Devs, DEVS?
Devs on FX, I think. I'm not sure, or I can't remember what network has that one, but definitely worth your time. A little bit of AI meets time travel in a way. We talked about both of those things today.
And Erin, anything that you love watching?
Oh, there's so many. It's hard for me to think of which ones to call out, but I know we just mentioned Expanse, but I should not say this out loud. I put off watching The Expanse. I didn't read The Expanse. I didn't have time for it. But then I decided to watch the TV show on, streaming, and fell absolutely in love with the show. Now I'm reading the novels because I can't get enough of it. I mean, that's how good The Expanse is.
A very faithful adaptation.
Yeah, it's terrific. Honestly, terrific show.
Yeah.
You mentioned Upload. I don't hear a lot of people talking about Upload, and I would just like to give that show some props. That is such a clever show that really takes a look at kind of the afterlife, at virtual reality to a degree, AI definitely to a degree. There's some really interesting stuff there. And I think I always have to recommend Person of Interest. It's absolutely one of my favorite shows, one of the best, most well-written TV shows that is out there. I think as time goes by, there's some elements that will definitely wear off a little bit, that won't hold up as much, but the writing, super solid. The story, super solid. Highly recommend it. And kind of makes me wish for a time where we did have an AI that was like benevolent. How nice would that be? How scary would that be? How fair would
God
that
with technology.
Yeah.
Double-edged sword always, right?
Well, before we go, there's just one thing that I wanted to mention that I think modern science fiction television does a lot better than older science fiction television or even movies, is we are getting to the point where we are much more fair and much more diverse in our storytelling, our storylines, and our character creation. We are not there yet, but I think that there's been a lot of growth in that area, and I love to see that happening. And I think it's very
that's going to open it up, right? That's going to open up the storytelling to roots that we haven't even thought of, because it's been the same kind of people writing.
Same POV,
Yeah,
absolutely.
The last 5 years, how much more diverse it's been. It's really exciting. Yeah. Well, gosh, thanks you so much, both of you. I wish I could talk to you all night. You guys are so awesome. Again, that's Michael Ahr, who is a writer at Den of Geek, and Erin Underwood, who works for MIT in emerging technology and also plans sci-fi. We didn't get to talk about that. I want to talk to you another time about that in an interview about planning sci-fi conventions. And speaking of evolution of technology, please join us next month. We're going to be talking about UFOs. I mean, it's different now. What is it now?
UAP, yeah.
UAPs is unidentified
aerial phenomena,
right? So they're changing it to make it feel like a little more legit and not just this joke. So that's really interesting. So we'll be talking all about UAPs in science fiction. That I think that's going to be a super lot of fun. And again, don't forget that the 47th annual Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival will be happening February 16th to 21st, 2022. It'll be here before you know it. Winter's coming.
Wait, that's not science fiction.
That's true.
That's fantasy.
That's definitely not science
That's good fantasy.
fantasy, yeah. I've always been more of a sci-fi girl than a fantasy girl, but I'll make an exception for Lord of the Rings. Always.
Or Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah, that was cool. Although I have so many things to say about that. Doesn't everybody though? But thank you again, and I hope we can have you guys both back on. It was amazing talking to you. I just want to thank everyone at the Sci-Fi Festival, Garen Daly, who is the founder and is still the director after so many years. He's really built up the science fiction festival, and our wonderful producer who makes all the little boxes pop up and all the little clips pop up beautifully, and does many other things. That would be Colby Peterson. So thank you very much, Colby. And again, thanks to our guests, and thank you guys for watching and for loving science fiction, as you should. And definitely tweet at us and let us know, some of your favorite films that have technology in them, or things that you think aren't right with the technology. We'd love to hear from you. So from all of us at Sci-Fi Fest, thanks so much and good night. Bye-bye.